Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and a warm welcome to tonight's edition of You Alive, an event organized by the NUS Office of Alumni Relations. My name is Sean, and I will be your MC for this evening. This evening's program will be in 3 sections. The first, a 10-minute talk by our speaker, Mr. Bernard Harrison, followed by a 20-minute interview with Mr. Viswa Sadasivan, Chairman of the You Alive Organizing Committee, and finally, a 30-minute question and answer session. If you would like to ask a question, please make your way to the aisles on both sides where there are microphones located. Say your name and speak clearly into the mic. This will allow our online community to be able to hear your questions as well. Tonight, we will also be using our new online app Pigeonhole Live to field the question and answer session. If you have a smartphone with you or a tablet, please launch the internet browser and go to this website, phlive.at. So again, that's phlive.at. Once you're in the site, you'll be able to key in our event passcode, which is UALIVE, UALIVE. So again, the event passcode is UALIVE. Once you're in the site, select the first option that you see, which is UALIVE featuring Mr. Bernard Harrison. And from there, you will be able to post any questions that you have. You will also be able to vote for questions that are already posted by clicking on the arrow beside each question. Questions with more votes stand a higher chance of being answered by our speaker. Without further ado, please sit back, relax, and enjoy.
Alive.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Bernard Harrison.
Well, I look like something out of Easy Rider. Good evening. Thank you very much for coming. I'm very honored to be invited to talk to you, and it's lovely to be here in Singapore, because actually I came from Bali. That's where I live with my wife Tina. This is not my alma mater. My alma mater is the University of Manchester, where I studied zoology and psychology. But this is my sort of second alma mater. But I was actually a university brat. I was raised in Nanyang University, which is now NTU, where my father was actually a professor of zoology. And then I grew up in the campus of Singapore University at Bukit Timah, where he was also then professor of zoology as well. So actually, I've hung around in universities in Singapore for a long time. But actually, when I was actually doing my master's at NUS, I actually visited the campus very little. I think probably about 10 times during the whole period I was doing my master's, mainly because I found as an undergraduate, you couldn't get a beer on the campus. I hope things have changed. I'm not sure. Anyway, this talk is called Why Do We Do What We Do? And basically, if we could knock the lights down a little bit, it would help for the images, because it's a very image-based talk. Why we are the supreme animal on the planet, but we have not yet learned how to rule with justice and compassion. For we still subjugate members of our own kind and treat the other 16 million species on Earth with utter contempt. How would we fare if our roles were reversed. We continue to rape and pillage Mother Earth and her resources. We act like modern-day barbarians, yet we have a conscience. But we don't seem to understand the consequences of our actions. We have eaten our way through most of the land-based megavertebrates around the world, driving them to extinction. Yet, unlike other carnivores, are not equipped with the claws, the powerful jaws, and the large canines to kill efficiently, effectively, and quickly. Our prey often suffers because we are clumsy to dispatch that death blow. This callousness and cruelty appears to be the product of our hunter instincts, having at best a utilitarian attitude towards animals. Only Hindus and Buddhists preach vegetarianism and humanity towards animal life. How did we end up like this? Well, 7 million years ago, all apes shared a common ancestor named Tamai, a forest-dwelling vegetarian from East Africa. 3.5 million years ago, Australopithecus was still a vegetarian and the direct ancestor of all the hominins. Climate change some 2 million years ago dried the forests of East Africa into savannas, forcing Homo erectus to change from being exclusively vegetarian to a hunter-gatherer. With no specialist killing adaptations, it is our lack of body hair and presence of sweat glands all over our body which allows hunters to chase and outrun their prey during the heat of the day, and normally the prey dies of heat exhaustion. Interestingly, humans were infested with two completely different species of lice, one that lives on our head hair and one that lives in our pubic hair. The head lice originated from man, but the pubic lice originated from gorillas. And I will not even try to speculate why that came about. One of the greatest psychosocial evolutionary advancements was the ability to create and use fire for cooking meat, for warmth, and for scaring away predators. Cooked meat is much easier to chew and digest, thus fire unleashed this completely new source of food. The out of Africa theory begins with the eruption of super volcano Toba, which is now Lake Toba, about 70,000 years ago. Because of a volcanic wintering that lasted several years, the human species was reduced to a pocket of about 14 individuals. That's all, 14 individuals left in East Africa. The Khoisan is the oldest existing human group in the world based on mitochondrial DNA studies, and were probably the original Eve and Adam. Their descendants migrated all over the world, actually back all over the world, because we had migrated around the world, then they all died out, and then we went back all over the world. And this is actually a picture of the megafauna in North America before we arrived about 10,000 years ago. Now, 70% are extinct, probably due to man and us killing them and eating them to extinction. About 10,000 years ago, we settled down in villages and towns, becoming more dependent on agriculture than hunting for our basic nutrition. Surplus food allowed for specialization. We shifted from an egalitarian society to create specialists like farmers, butchers, artisans, and soldiers. We needed priests and kings to lead us, and who in turn subjugated us. And we created the concept of war. To this day, man and ants are the only two that fight and kill their own species. And we developed somewhere along the line, a conscience, which allowed us to make moral judgments, to differentiate between right and wrong, good from evil, and understand the concept of justice. Although the conscience appears to be innately inherited, it is honed by those who are close to us, our parents, teachers, and peer groups as role models. For we are only a mirror of our society in which we are raised. And that says, I have eaten two humans. One was a man, the other was a woman. They tasted the same. Our conscience allows us to understand the consequences of our actions. It is because we are hunters that we have so little empathy for animals that we kill. I'm certainly not a vegetarian, make no bones about that fact, and enjoy a great piece of meat. But I detest the way many of the animals we eat are raised and slaughtered. Most of us are completely unaware of modern farming methods used to raise, slaughter, and distribute meat. I'm saddened by the lack of respect we give animals when they go to slaughter. We're now totally removed from the killing process. Specialists slaughter and process the 300 billion kilograms of meat that we eat each year. I believe, like Jamie Oliver, that if you want to eat meat, you should be able to make the kill and butcher it too, or else don't eat meat. But soon, there'll be a substitute. Laboratory cultured beef will be marketed as humanely and organically raised, free from antibiotics and growth hormones, and also free from guilt. Some animals with a primitive nervous system are easy to eat alive without any feeling of remorse. But our conscience is surely tested by the Korean dish of live octopus, for this is a highly intelligent invertebrate. There is a Chinese saying, anything that walks, swims, crawls, or flies with its back to the heaven is edible. Live monkey's brain is surely one of the most bizarre and disgusting of the Chinese dishes given to the world. But I'm appalled that some Africans relish eating chimpanzee and gorilla bushmeat, our genetically closest relatives. The chromosomes of chimpanzees and men are 78.6% identical. In China, bears have been turned into automatic bile-making machines. Around the world, we fin sharks and throw them back alive to fulfill the banquet obligations of the Chinese. And rhinoceros horn for traditional Chinese medicine. Where is our conscience, or rather, when was it hijacked? The Japanese and the Danish governments allow the slaughter of dolphins because they compete with their fishing industries. Unfair competition, we obviously have a monopoly in the world. We enslave animals for our pleasure or to make us money. We keep wild animals in miserable and appalling conditions with a total disregard for their most fundamental animal welfare. I am pro-zoo, but feel that 90% of all zoos in the world should be shut down. I'm a conservationist, but I'm confused by many moral dilemmas. If there's a market for an endangered species product, it will be conserved. The Gucci Python Conservation Partnership will conserve pythons to ensure a constant source of skins for handbags. A recently produced giant panda poo green tea sells for $85,000 a kilo. And if successful, the future survival of giant pandas is surely guaranteed. I do not flinch too much at the farming of crocodiles for their skins and their meat. This apex predator just doesn't have that fuzzy appeal to me. But the farming of tigers for their body parts for the ever-growing China market disgusts me immensely. What have we reduced these noble hunters to? And the thought of farming chimpanzees and gorillas for the ever-growing bushmeat appetite in Africa is to me totally morally wrong. Yet Africa will soon be the new China as the population and GDP rises faster than the education and moral values. 2050, the population of Africa is projected to be 2.5 billion people. Why do we do what we do. It seems that much of the world still needs to be taught conservation and ethics. The now immortalized words of the Senegalese conservationist, Baba Diom: "In the end, we will conserve only what we love. We will love only what we know, and we will know only what we are taught." Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Thank
Pleasure.
you. Breath of fresh air, indeed. But what's this got to do with our GDP? No, I'm kidding. I mean, that question is important as a Singaporean, because our whole lives center on GDP.
Yeah, well,
and by that definition, you are an indulgent ape. So, more seriously, this is a very compelling talk to a group of individuals who obviously is a biased sample. The reason why we are here is because we are interested in the subject, because we are interested in you. I'm sure you have given similar talks to a more eclectic audience, people who may not have any interest or sympathy for the subject matter. How do you deal with that? Besides being disillusioned.
Well, I think to tell you the truth, I mean, this kind of talk, actually, you get it all the time. I mean, I think the media bashes this kind of thing. What I was trying to do was to actually not say we shouldn't do all these things. What I was trying to understand is, well, why? Why do
what
we
makes
do
us
it?
do it?
Yeah, what is the fundamental reason that man is so screwed up? Because we are so amazingly screwed up, and we have this conscience. And it should be telling us you shouldn't do that, because that's what a conscience is all about. And actually we know technically that we shouldn't do it, but we do, and that's why it's an enigma. We're strange. We're very strange people.
I mean, you've studied this for some time. What's your sense of it?
Actually, I haven't studied it for very long. I only actually studied this concept when I was preparing for this talk. I was actually on holiday with my son and daughter. Daughter's a vegetarian, son's an ethical, humane animal. Only eats humanely killed animals.
But he eats animals.
Humanely killed.
Okay.
But when you actually boil it down to find a humanely killed animal, not humanely killed, humanely raised. As soon as you start talking about humanely raised animals, I mean, you see like battery chickens, pigs. It's difficult to find an animal that's been humanely raised and treated properly, given a certain amount of respect, and then taken to market and killed nicely. It's difficult. So actually, we eat some fish.
Actually, I like fish.
Yes, I do.
You became famous as the man who started the zoo in Singapore.
It was actually Dr. Ong.
Yeah,
my
but
chairman. Yeah.
you did it. Okay, Dr. Ong was the man who probably designed it, but the man who really made it happen is you. Don't be modest now. The point here is...
You haven't let me say anything. Okay, carry on.
The thing is, I was very intrigued by what you said about dignity. But isn't it terrible also to make animals spectacles? I mean, I see a serious contradiction. Here you talk about animals and giving animals the dignity they deserve, but you were responsible for putting them in cages, although you call it free space.
Open enclosures.
But come on, and end of the day, they still were made spectacles.
Yeah.
And you were doing that for a long time.
30 years.
Yeah.
And now I do it as a consultancy.
Yeah, as a consultancy. You are proliferating it.
Yeah, so like...
So how do you deal with this? First of all, do you see it as a contradiction? And if you do, how do you live with yourself?
Yeah. I have a talk called Auschwitz versus Club Med. And it's the same concept, really. It's like you take these animals. Zoo animals, actually, I would say 90% of mammals displayed in zoos, correct me if I'm wrong, Kumar, he's from a zoo. In fact, you can blame him.
I know,
actually.
I know him.
90% of mammals in zoos are actually probably born in zoos, and they have no other knowledge of life except being in a zoo. So they've never ran on the Serengeti plains, and they've never been as free as a bird, although free as a bird actually technically is wrong, because birds are not free, they're actually confined by their territories, and they can't move out of those territories.
So it's a bit like Singaporeans.
Yeah, yeah. I prefer to be a bird, actually. But yeah, no, so the thing is that animals in zoos are a certain type of animal. They're not real animals. They're kind of zoo animals. And in fact, if you put them back to the wild, a lot of them can't survive. They don't know how to survive. You have to teach them. You have to teach the hunters how to hunt. You have to teach
but that's unnatural, right?
It is
an animal
unnatural.
is born.
Yes, but
born an animal,
yes,
and then
but
you domesticate it and call it what you just did.
The reason we put them in zoos is we're not doing the animals a favor. I mean, we didn't.
Obviously.
Yeah, we're the supreme beings. We call the shots. We do whatever we want. But we put them in a zoo so that we can teach humans about animals. And if it's a good zoo, like Singapore Zoo, then it actually displays them in a way that they look happy. If you ask them, Ming, you happy? Yes. You know, they probably are happy.
But didn't you? I mean, I was sharing with you earlier on. The first time I set eyes on you.
It was
in was in '84.
It was mutual.
Was in wow. I'm flattered. I'm blushing. You can't see. Mistake me not for my complexion. But in '84, I was then producer of this program called Feedback. If you know the name, if you know the program, you are letting us know your vintage. And we did a feature on animals. And Kumar, you know this, right? And we interviewed you. The first time I saw you, and you took us for a walk. And we came to this place where the ostriches were. There was this particular ostrich, beautiful animal, but the left eye was virtually gone. I asked you what happened, and you said, this guy walked about, he saw the animal, and he used his umbrella to poke the eye. Okay, and the animal was apparently writhing in pain when you saw it, when someone, the zoo, saw it. And I remember that particular episode stuck in my mind. And you also had an aside. You said, you know, the problem is most of us would look at an animal like this and say how lovely the plume is, you know, how lovely the feathers are. But some people would look at the same animal and say, wow, what a lovely drumstick. It's all about different perceptions of the same thing, right? Now that's cruelty, not just subjecting the animal to being a spectacle, but it's cruelty. There was also the case of other animals who were fed with plastic bags, right? There were instances of those animals dying. There were instances of animals being taught how to smoke, who were addicted to smoking, primates. So I can't quite buy the argument, no matter which way you put it, that the zoo actually is a different way of giving people who don't know enough about animals a healthy sense of appreciation of these animals. A spectacle is a spectacle. So I'm just, maybe I'm playing the devil's advocate, but
you should be.
How would you justify it?
Yeah. Okay.
Where does one draw the line?
Well, that's why I said I would draw the line at 90%. Shut 90% down. There's about 15,000 zoos in the world. Shut most of them down. Keep about 1,005, which are good, doing what they're meant to be doing, which is displaying animals humanely, having good welfare, good educational programs, and giving people a feeling that when they walk in that it's a nice place. It's not Auschwitz. It's actually Club Med. And treating the animals well, giving them a great life. They didn't ask to be there, but they're there, you know. So morally, or ethically, well, we chose to bring them into captivity. So make sure that they have a good time there. And I think that's the issue. And the purpose of the animals being there is to educate us about conservation. I mean, in other words, to teach humans why we should conserve the environment, why we should conserve wildlife. And hopefully they leave, and we shaped and changed their attitude that when they leave, they'll actually come in, and they'll leave and say, hey, I want to do something. So we empower them to go away and say, yeah, I think we should try and help animals, save the environment, you know, and I think that's the kind of the philosophy of a good zoo, you know. The problem is there's so many bad zoos in the world that really don't do that and have no concept about what they're doing, and they're just keeping some animals together, if it's a private zoo, well, they're trying to make a bit of money. If it's a public zoo, well, they're just underpaid public servants who just kind of keep these animals, and it's horrible. You know, it's just, you know, I went to University of Manchester for 3 years as a zoology student. I never went to the zoo once because I heard it was terrible. In fact, when I came back to Singapore, before I joined Singapore Zoo, I didn't want to have anything to do with zoos at all.
So what changed?
I went to Singapore Zoo. I saw Singapore Zoo and I said, this is a fantastic zoo. It was designed and built by, well, Aung Sri Law was there. Obviously, he was the chairman. It was actually designed by a Sri Lankan, who was actually, I classify as my guru. I think we all classify as a guru. A guy called Lin Dialwas, who passed away, unfortunately, about 3 years ago. And he was the director of the Colombo Zoo. And he designed Singapore Zoo. And he actually came up with the concept and designed Night Safari. But more importantly, I think he instilled in us this concept of respect. He's the guy who taught me the quote from Baba Diam, you know, in the end, you know. And it's like, and he was very passionate about it. He was director of the zoo and director of national parks. So he was a very broad-based man, a very wise man, and he was kind of good guy. Then,
you know, I think there's a correlation between the way people treat animals in a society and the way people treat people. I think there's a correlation. Do you all think there's a correlation? Societies, the way people treat animals and the way people treat fellow people. How many of you think there is a correlation? Okay, majority. So, what's your sense?
yeah, I think so. I do a lot of work in China. I have nothing against China mainland and the Chinese, lovely people. But there is a very sad mentality in China that animals are totally utilitarian. You keep a dog to guard the house, you keep a cat to catch the mice, you grow a tree to bear fruit, and if it doesn't bear fruit, you chop it down. Everything is very utilitarian. It's like, I think the great religions of Buddhism and Hinduism teach us to be a bit more compassionate, you know? Especially Buddhists. Taught to be compassionate. Buddhists say, don't kill anything, you know. Try not to kill animals if you can. Even an ant, you know, don't step on it. I mean, just brush it aside, you know. And these are compassionate teachings, and basically, I think as a race, we're so arrogant about the fact that we are the supreme animals. We don't even debate whether we are the supreme. We are the supreme animals. And therefore, everything else is not a human. And therefore, it is not worthy of any respect. And that's why actually in this opening presentation, I said actually there are 16 million species of animals in the world, and we just treat them like it's our place, but actually it's not. We share this world with them. It's a whole ecosystem that we share.
But someone who is a public policy person would tell you that you need to prioritize in society. All right? We have finite resources, financial resources in particular. We need to decide where to park those resources.
Yeah.
And in Singapore, we need to park those resources to make sure that we have enough FDIs, foreign direct investments, because FDIs create jobs. Jobs feed families, right?
Yeah.
And so on. So what I'm trying to say is, and there's nothing wrong with that, nothing fundamentally wrong with that thought process. It's very logical, right? Because people need to survive. And scarcity is the order of the day.
Yeah.
So in this scenario, in the scheme of things, where do you think the need to treat animals with dignity is in the food chain? Where is it?
I had lunch with Hao Yun Chong. Hao Yun Chong used to be the Minister of Defense, used to be a pretty kind of gruff old civil servant who turned politician. I had lunch with him and Sir Peter Scott, who is Sir Peter Scott, conservationist, and Sir Peter Scott was trying to convince Hao Yun Chong or the Singapore government to.
He was then defense minister already.
He was a defense minister.
Okay.
Yeah. And he had been kind of told to go and meet this guy and see what he wants. And Sir Peter Scott was trying to convince Hao Yun Chong to ratify CITES. CITES is the Convention of International Trade in Endangered Species. And Hao Yun Chong said, well, we don't need this. We don't need this convention. We're happy without it, you know. And Sir Peter Scott was saying, yeah, but it's like it's so important to be part of the world community, to all kind of get together and let's try and conserve the environment, basically. And he came from, Hao Yun Chong came from a group an era of civil servant politicians who really were not interested in
Practical.
No, I don't think it's practical in their terms, but just not interested in we as far as we're concerned, the environment has and conservation has got no bearing on the growth of Singapore, and when I used to go and try and talk to government about these kind of issues, the civil servants that I met were just totally, they didn't even know what you're talking about.
You're part of
That
the
was
problem.
35 years ago. But thank God now, I think, the government is very enlightened. And you talk to younger civil servants, they know about the environment. They know what the environment's all about. So Singapore, I think, has changed. But because of education, we are a highly educated society. We educate our people and...
highly schooled or highly educated?
Well, highly universitied. But whatever it is, I think there is this kind of, everybody's aware of the environment, which is good for
part of the problem is that you've got long hair and you have a ponytail.
Who, me?
Yeah, how do you expect you to be taken seriously?
Because I hunt
This is a
trees.
country where at one point, anyone with long hair I'm not sure whether some of you younger ones know this, but anyone with long hair, was it 60s,
Will
up
be
to
served,
70s?
will be served last.
Up to the 70s, right? Or even
About
80s?
75, because
75.
I was served last
Yeah.
several times.
Yeah. You know? And there was actually a rule that if you've got long hair, first of all, you know, in many places you can't, not just the army, many places you will not be admitted, including this university.
There was a poster in
Yeah.
every civil servant, in every public building, in the post office especially. And it was a poster, and it had 4 profiles of somebody with long hair. And a gangsterish looking character,
I mean,
with a pencil-thin moustache.
the good thing is that they restricted that to male.
Yes, that's
Okay.
right. But it was hair that touched
Yeah.
the eyebrow,
And ear.
hair that touched the top of the ear, and hair that touched the top of a normal shirt collar. These were classified as long hair.
Yeah.
And they would be served last.
And it was actually implemented.
Yeah.
Right? You know why? Because it had a strong association with something we didn't want in Singapore called hippie culture. And for the same reason, flowers were not allowed to be sold. Right. No, we digress.
Yeah.
Okay. So, no, but there's a serious point to it. In a land where discipline is the order of the day, uniformity is the order of the day, someone like you is an oddity and will not be taken seriously. And I would suggest that if you have a PhD, and especially from this university, my God, you know,
It's only a master's.
very highly ranked, right?
It's only a master's. Sorry.
No, if you had,
Oh, if I had.
if you had that,
Oh, my
and if you
God.
cut your hair, and if you didn't have facial hair,
I could have become a politician. I could have been
I wouldn't subject you to that.
Minister of
I wouldn't
Defense.
subject us to that. No, but the truth is, chances are, and if you wore a suit or wore a tie, and you would
I was
probably
thinking of wearing a
the
suit,
same thing you said would have been taken a little bit more seriously.
Probably.
You know. So my point here is, you could be someone like you, and people who fight strongly for esoteric things like the environment, right? Actually, until today, are considered a subculture. You are indulged, but not necessarily taken seriously. You're indulged, but not, I'm talking about Singapore, I don't know about the rest of the world.
Sure.
Zimbabwe, probably different. But in Singapore,
Probably
because
worse.
you've been to Zimbabwe, but in Singapore, this is my experience, anyone who is a little bit more puritanical about the way you want to advocate will not be taken seriously because you're deemed to be impractical. Honestly, Bernard, has that been your experience?
I'm not sure, actually. But I certainly do. I certainly do think that obviously, if I conformed more to society, what is expected of society, possibly I'd be taken more seriously. But
Isn't that one of the reasons why you left the zoo?
Well, but let me just say, probably I wouldn't be heard because because the thing is, if I suddenly cut my hair and wore a suit, and then everybody would say, well, who's this guy?
He's not authentic.
Yeah. Whereas if you're kind of like a bit radical, a bit different, and then people say, oh, well, strange. Who's that strange guy? And in fact, when I was at Temasek, I mean, Singapore Zoo is a part of Temasek Holdings, and it's like they always sort of, when we go to these functions, it's like, that guy from the zoo, he's like that. I mean, that's the zoo. You know? I mean,
He's that animal. No,
just on Zimbabwe for just a sec, since you mentioned
No, but I asked you a question in between. It's
Yeah,
called,
yeah. Oh,
wasn't that
sorry.
the reason why you left the zoo?
Yes, well, if
Bring up the mic, please.
If the truth is to be told, and it'll come out next month on the 11th of April anyway, and somebody commented on my casual dress this evening, and I said, well, on the 11th of April, when the book is launched, which is written by Kapil Singh and about me, and it's called Naked Ape, Naked Boss. And I will be attending that launch with a slightly less casual clothing than this time. So,
I mean, how do you expect people to take a book written by two men with long hair
and pink turban.
and you're such a subculture, but why? So you're not going to comment on that. You're not going to answer the question
Which was the question?
about why you left the zoo.
Oh, okay, yes, I will. Okay.
Is it age or what?
Nah, I'm trying to hedge
And you
the
told me you
question.
dye your hair.
No. No, I left the zoo because, yes, I went through a period of time with one chairman, Dr. Ong Swee Law, who was actually very much like me.
Yeah.
I mean, he and I were out of the same mold. He was anti-establishment. He was anti-civil service. He was anti-PAP.
Okay, can we edit that?
He's dead now, anyway. It's okay. And,
No, for my sake.
Okay. Oh, I see. And he just was a rebel, but in a very authoritarian shell. But he was a rebel. He was anti everything, and so he was one of my mentors. And so he actually raised me because, like, I worked with him for like 20 years, and he taught me how to be a rebel. Didn't particularly condone the long hair and the stuff like that, but, it was a rebel. And then when he died, and then we had a new chairman, Dr. Kwa Soon Bee. Dr. Kwa
The surname sounds very familiar.
Yeah, he was
What's
the
that family?
he was the brother-in-law of Lee Kuan Yew. But Dr. Kwa was actually a permsec, and he left the civil service
Permsec Health.
permsec Health about 10 years after he met me. 10 years before he met me, but he was more civil service than the civil service. Civil service had moved on. So he was very entrenched in a very old-style civil service. And so really, it was like chalk and cheese. I mean, it was very difficult for us to see eye to eye about a lot of things. And so eventually I left here.
Well, I'm seeing this happen more and more. People who join a vocation, join a trade, because you're passionate about it, you believe in it, right? Almost to a fault, like you. And then this thing called KPIs come in. In case you're wondering what it is, it's not the name of a new expressway. It is key performance indicators. They come in the way. There's nothing wrong with KPIs as long as they are standalones, but they do come in the way of passion. They do come in the way of passion that's often seen as indulgence / inefficiency, right? So I'd like to put this question to you. Where does one draw the line? When we talk about rootedness, when we talk about people believing in the things that matter and fighting causes so that you continue to make this your home, versus a pure and single-minded pursuit of KPIs and economic goals. I'm not saying that they're mutually exclusive necessarily, but there seems to be a lot more emphasis on let's move the efficiency route, let's move that way, right? But there are people who are very passionate about it, and passion sometimes can prove to be less efficient. But where does that leave people who are passionate and maybe not the most efficient? Where does it leave us?
Good question.
Where does this take our society?
Living in Bali, we have a completely different lifestyle from living in Singapore. I mean, it's like totally different. Indonesia is not a particularly organized place. Bali is probably a highly organized place in Indonesia, but it's not particularly compared to Singapore. It's not. And but somehow they get by, works. A lot less pressure, a lot less not so well managed. But I think we do see real people there, and one of the things that concerns me about Singapore is that we've got so good at doing everything so well, and we're so concerned about doing it and maintaining it that we're losing that passion and that soul. I don't know what one does about that.
Well, I guess the point is we want to plan it. And as a minister several years ago shared with me, he said, we are so serious about fun and spontaneity that we want to plan it. Okay, on that happy note, let's throw it open to the floor. As I remind you, always, questions, but not speeches. You can even have a comment, but not a speech, please. So could we have the first question, comment? You can be irreverent, even though you're Singaporean. Yes, oh. Give him a hand, man. My old friend.
Yeah, my name is Tan Sri Ping, graduate back in 1955. No, I have two questions to ask you. No.
But you live in Johor?
No, I'm from Batu Pahat, Johor, but I study in Bukit Timah. Yeah. Now become Singapore citizen. Thanks to Mr. Lim Yew Hock, who want us to vote, and then you give you your IC, and you become a Singapore citizen.
Lim Yew Hock.
Back. Yeah.
Lim Yew Hock, in case you don't know, was our first chief minister second chief minister in 1956. Yeah. Before even I was born.
Now, you mentioned that we human beings, being the dominant animal, so to speak, and we control and we slaughter all the animals and all that for food. But I was thinking, from the beginning, aren't we all vegetarians? Isn't it?
Yeah, we were.
Do we have to go out and hunt for the food, and we have a taste for chicken or ostrich or whatever it is, and then we continue to slaughter irrespective of whether they will be extinct or not? Right? So I was thinking whether we are dominant because of our brain size. We human beings, how many grams in 70 kilo or something, compared with a big elephant, giant elephant, but the brain is so small. So comparatively speaking, is it because of our brain size that we dominate other animals and probably slaughter any of them?
Yes, I think definitely. I think we're also one of the most intelligent, if not the most intelligent species. That's why we can hunt them without any weaponry.
Then the second thing is, in terms of the universe, the animal also probably have got an equal right to stay in wherever they are in the jungle and so on. But we humans come along, pull down all the trees and all that, and build houses for ourselves. So I was thinking whether
we also build houses for the animals.
I know, but is it
called zoos.
Very unfair, because they have an equal right for a space in this universe, right? But eventually, I think most of them will be extinct because we occupy all the spaces, make it big town, make New York City and all so on, So in terms of fairness, probably that is be unfair to the animal. Then one more thing you mentioned, carbon footprint.
Sipeng, how many questions you have?
Yeah. Carbon footprint. So to produce 1 kilogram of wheat or sweet potato or something, probably don't use so much of the carbon footprint. But you want to have 1 kilogram of beef or mutton or something, probably you have to grow the kilogram of wheat, feed it to the animal, and then have to
Yeah.
let them grow and slaughter them and use
Not to
electricity and all that. Yeah.
not to mention the amount of carbon dioxide that's
Yeah.
emitted by animals,
Yeah.
I think the most
bodily as well as through the feces.
I think the two most efficient forms of food that we can generate are algae and maggots for animal and plant protein. And we should actually focus on trying to make them more palatable, because that's
You
probably
realize
what we're
he's
going to end
saying
up
this
eating.
with a straight face?
So I was thinking, if you carry this theory through, eventually all of us will become vegetarian, right?
Sure.
In order not to produce too much carbon footprint and all that. So you come to think of it, instead of eating 1 kilogram of beef and mutton and so on, why don't we eat some wheat or some other stuff and fill our stomach,
Sure.
right?
So is that an
So
aspiration?
eventually all of us become vegetarian.
Yeah. I think eventually we probably will. In fact, I've been debating that with Sean on this
Yeah.
the same trip.
Yeah, that's all I have to contribute.
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I don't like that hand. Okay. This is going to be a tough one, okay? This girl is trained in law. No, we can't hear you.
we
And
can't.
besides, the people, by the way, this whole thing is being webcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, so for the webcastees, they can't hear what you're saying. Walk faster.
I'm just going to take from where the gentleman left off. It is not quite a question per se. I promise that it won't become a speech, but I'll try to promise
It's
it won't become
becoming
a
a
speech.
speech.
It is, with a lot of qualification. My simple question is actually, one is personal and one is a bit more general. The personal question is, with your background, why are you not vegetarian? Firstly. And I don't know if that's a fair question, unfair question.
That's a carnal
Secondly-
question.
Secondly, the reality is, where do all of us go? And by that question, I mean, even if we do practice ethical farming, you have solutions in science that allow you to consume meat without having to kill animals. It means that we have to continue coexisting with the population as is, with the animals that we have. But the reality is we keep urbanizing. And is it practical for us to continue not urbanizing certain areas? And if we move on, the reality is man is going to continue multiplying, and he has to find a way to coexist with this species. And isn't it much easier then to argue that we have found, albeit a bit unethical, but an efficient way of dealing with this, the way of dealing with scarcity, of dealing with the reality that comes with being on this earth, that things die, things move on, and it's just a more efficient way of dealing with it. And I guess thirdly,
Okay. What's it up?
No, but I don't,
Can you ask okay, now,
yes.
ask the question in English.
Sorry,
Okay,
English is
what-
actually not my first language.
Because I'm having a problem trying to understand what exactly the question is. So
Okay.
why don't you tell us what your question is?
Simply put, with the way we are evolving, and with the fact at how technology is evolving, and thirdly, with all these conservation efforts, how can we all possibly coexist in the limited space that is Earth?
Okay, good.
English? Yes, thank you.
Definitely.
Okay.
English is good.
So 2 questions. First, why am I a carnivore? Why do I eat meat? I enjoy meat. I think it's great stuff. I'm looking forward to the stem cell produced beef that's going to come onto supermarkets in 5 years' time, which will initially be hamburgers and sausages, but will eventually be rump steak and sirloin steak. And I'm genuinely feel that it's a lovely way to not feel bad about eating animals. I could be a vegetarian, I guess, eventually, but I'm not. I mean, I just enjoy eating meat. How are we going to coexist together? I think we obviously need to look at very serious ways of managing our resources. We've got to actually control population, and the big areas which are coming online are Africa and Latin America, which are two areas which are going to be huge populations. At the moment, they're not consuming a lot of meat. If you look at actually the statistics, 300 billion kilos of meat a year averages at 45 kilos per person per year. But actually, when you look at the statistics, it's not. It's actually 300 kilos per person in the States and Europe, and in India, 5 kilos per head. So we do have to curb our meat eating because it's the most inefficient way of generating protein. And we do have to look at alternative sources of protein. And that's why I actually said, and I wasn't joking actually, algae and maggots are actually two of the most efficient producers of protein. And we should look at that quite seriously. And we should look at reducing the population of humans.
I think it's happening naturally in Singapore.
Yeah, well, yeah. Unfortunately, a lot of yes, it is in the countries which have finally got that conscience and understood that moral problem and are educated. These are the guys who are not reproducing themselves, and who are not reproducing themselves. So okay. Japan, Europe, they're dying, man. They're old people.
So you're linking...
It's your young countries who are uneducated.
So you're
Africa.
linking moral conscience with...
Education.
With sexual drive.
Not with sexual drive.
Okay, we've got some questions online. I'm going to put one question up. Without preaching, how would you recommend spreading the message of conservation, sustainable development, and animal protection to those who are unwilling to adopt such a lifestyle? This is I think it's a great question because the vast majority of people out there are unwilling to accept it. Theoretically, academically, they can accept it, but in practice, they say no. Mm. Right?
Yeah, it's one of the biggest...
So how would you do it? I mean, I would imagine that long hair and everything aside, you are probably...
Hey, Jesus had long hair,
That's almost blasphemous. Okay. No, but seriously, I mean, now I'm really being serious for the first time this evening. I think you would probably be one of the most credible advocates of this cause if you put your mind to it. And the question, I guess, here is, what is it that someone like you can do to help to promote deeper, more serious consciousness in this space and where it matters?
I'm very impressed with an NGO called Asian Conservation Awareness Program, ACAP.
ACAP, yeah.
And Wild Aid now, I think they're morphed into. And they have taken role models, movie stars. Jackie Chan is their ambassador, and they've got a whole a battery of role models in various countries, especially in the most important countries, because I'm not trying to knock China, but you got 1.1 billion people there, all not particularly educated, had 50 years of communism, and now starting to become affluent. Suddenly, you from 0 people eating meat and shark's fin, now you've got like 300 million affluent middle-class Chinese walking and talking and wanting to eat shark's fin, and that's the thing. So it's important that we address these particular nations, and so it's using role models and the media to tell people, this is what you should do, this is what you shouldn't do. And I think people do actually respond to it.
Yeah, I think so.
much more. And so I would do that. I would actually, if I had a powerful budget, I mean, that's what I would do. I would enlist as many people as I could to come in and create.
What's stopping you, Bernard, today from leading the charge in Singapore? I think it's the low-hanging fruit. I mean, there are a lot of young Singaporeans.
Never
I
thought
meet
of
young
this.
Singaporeans
Yeah.
who I think are interested,
Yeah.
but they are not sure how to start, how to go about it. Why wouldn't you lead the charge in Singapore?
Interesting question. I never thought about it, actually.
How many of you here, if Bernard leads the charge, don't bluff, okay? Tell the truth. How many of you would, and it's a serious question, how many of you would support him in a tangible way? How many of you? Seriously. So few are useless people. Come on. Seriously. I mean, the rest of you, you wouldn't support him? You wouldn't? Why not? It probably is
no
an
economic
indication.
gain. No
Probably is an
economic
indication that it's not important enough. And it probably means that you have not been able to persuade us that it's an important enough matter. And why not?
Bad PowerPoint presentation.
All right, let me recast the question. How many of us here feel that the subject matter is an important enough subject? It's important for countries to start addressing. So, a significant number of us believe that it's an important enough subject matter. But a very small number of us are committed to walk the talk. What does it say about us? What does it say about us, guys? Shame on us, really. See, and because of you, he's not going to lead the charge.
But it's interesting. I have a consultant in England, a guy called Simon Corder, who's a lighting specialist that I use. And he is, if you want to talk about walk the talk, this guy walks the talk. I mean, he recycles everything. He doesn't take planes, he cycles. He brings his bicycle with him everywhere, even on trains and planes, so that he can cycle to wherever he's going. And these are people in places like UK, where you have these people who are actually very concerned and very aware of the environment, very concerned about the environment and the future of the planet, who are doing stuff almost fanatically. And I sometimes I say, Simon is crazy, you know. Whereas on the other side of the coin, it's like getting people to even get concerned about recycling. You know. I mean, in Singapore, it's like, do we actually recycle stuff? I mean, I see bins around, you know, plastic and glass, but actually, does it really get recycled?
I think those bins are basically to teach children about different colors.
Yes. But it's like, yeah.
Sesame Street.
It would be a shame. I mean, we're so good at campaigns in Singapore. I mean, we have done so many campaigns in Singapore. And it would be so easy to say, get rid of plastic bags. Don't sell, give plastic bags. Do you know, there is something called the plastic soup, the Pacific plastic soup, which floats, there's two of them actually. One of them is the size of continental United States and floats around the Pacific Rim near Canada, United States. And the other one is the Western plastic Pacific soup, which floats around Japan. And they are just huge places of plastic. There's this plastic, they're plastic forests. They just are sitting there. And people don't know about this. But it's plastic bags which have been dumped into the sea since the 1950s, 1960s. So it's 50 years worth of plastic garbage that we've dumped into the sea. There are albatrosses on the Marshall Islands, the Midway Islands, which are 3,000 miles from nowhere, 3,000 miles from Honolulu. That's where the Marshall Islands are, in the middle of the Pacific. By the way, 70% of the ocean, of the world, fortunately, is ocean. And the albatrosses have been feeding their babies, nestlings, on plastic. And if you go and Google it, just Google albatross baby plastic, and look at some of the images that you have of albatross chicks that are full of plastic beads and plastic bags and plastic bits and pieces. And that's in the middle of nowhere, and yet we are impacting those animals there. You know. So I don't know what we do. You know. I don't know how we. Yeah, but we've still got to get rid of that 60 years of plastic. I agree totally. And it's no good shredding it. Australia just shreds it and chucks it into the ocean, and it's just small plastic then. You know, we got to kind of stop using plastic. You know, it's a big issue.
Anyone else? Yes,
There's a woman there in the
Which
front.
woman? Which woman?
The one with the blue, the blue
No, you cannot answer
snake
yet.
suit,
Wait.
with the one with the blue snakeskin
Yes,
shoes.
the gentleman in, yeah.
Hi, my name is Rahul. The question, Rahul, yes.
Rahul, yes.
The question is, look, you argue that it's because of utilitarianism in China and Chinese people that causes them to raise animals in the way they do. I think it's not pure utilitarianism, because if
Sorry, what?
you're talking about utilitarianism,
Oh, utilitarian. Okay, yes, okay.
and it can't be just that, because if it was, then in the long term, it makes sense for people to raise animals and for plants for sustainable development living in general, because then you would have a lot of the resources that we'd want in the future. The issue is really that we have a very short-term mindset. We only think as far as maximum our kids or our grandkids' generation. And so that's why I think a lot of the lifestyles that we have, we don't care as much and about how we leave the world 100 years from now. The plastic that you're talking about, it's an issue, 80 years later that we figure it out. And so the question is then, how do you make this a value that people care about, given that we have a propensity as humans for just thinking about the short term rather than the long-term impacts of our actions?
Just on the utilitarianism for a moment. When I say utilitarian attitude about the Chinese, it's compared to, say, the Northern Europeans, Australians, and North Americans, who have a much greater empathy towards animals. You know, so whereas Chinese really do say, these are beasts of burden, that's their only function, and if you can't work, then we'll eat it. Whereas the Northern Europeans, they're sort of saying they love animals. They do have a genuine empathy for animals, and so I think that kind of differentiation is one, and that's attitudes. And the other is, as I say, the religion. I mean, the religion is important. That some religions do preach that you should be more empathetic. But your final question was, so just say it again. Just can encapsulate it in.
Given that we're all short-term oriented and we only think about short-term things, we're not really going to be convinced necessarily to change our actions, because the impacts that you're talking about are very long-term. So how do we kind of facilitate that change in mindset?
Okay. Well, that's what I was talking a little bit about, the conscience. And it's like, obviously, a conscience can be very, very narrow, or it can be very large, and I suppose it's really we need to educate our children and and hopefully actually the people of the same age as us, that we do have a problem. I mean, we can't be instant gratification people. We can't just look at what impacts us in the present. I mean, we do have to take a step back and look at what our actions, what are the effects of the actions that we take now. I think that's something which surely comes with education. And if we are educated, if we're and we are this ruling species, I mean, we need to learn how to manage ourselves, our people, and they in turn then need to learn how to manage the environment and the planet, because if we don't, then we really are heading for a major disaster. And it will be very, very sad when we destroy a lot of what we have and find it very difficult to repair. And so I think we do have to be a lot more assertive about environmental issues than we are. And I say when we are, in the context of Singapore, when I say we, it means the government. And I think government hasn't been assertive enough about the environment, although it's starting to. But
no, but having said that, I just have a point to make there. I think one of the greatest conservationists in Singapore is Lee Kuan Yew.
yes, couldn't agree more.
I don't necessarily agree with a lot of his policies or views, but I must give him credit. If not for his vision, a lot more of Singapore would be concrete.
Yes.
Right?
He was.
The zoo itself was his idea.
No,
No?
was Dr. Ong Swee Low's.
Okay. But
And,
wasn't...
and Go King Swee supported.
All right.
him.
What was...
Actually, Lee
what
Kuan Yew was
Lee
against.
Kuan Yew
It was against the zoo.
against the idea?
He said the lions and tigers will eat us out of house and home.
Okay.
It took the cabinet 2.5 years to debate whether to approve the budget for the night safari.
Oh, really?
Cabinet couldn't figure out why anybody
earth?
should leave their television sets in their HD flats at night to go to Mandai and look at a bunch of animals at night. They just couldn't figure that one out. I don't know how many sessions they had, but it took them 2.5 years.
They didn't realize there's such a thing as lights. Okay.
As lice?
Lights.
Oh, lights.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about lice for a minute.
Because otherwise, without lights, you can't see the gorilla at night. Yeah. It links quite well to the question, and this is a good last question. Conscience is not something that is passed on genetically or mimetically. How does one develop a conscience if it does not come naturally? This is the mother of all questions.
Actually, interestingly enough, when I was doing my first degree, I did a double degree in zoology and psychology. And my thesis for it was the moral development of children, and cross-culturally. And so I studied the moral development of children in Singapore and in the UK. And Piaget had done a lot of work on this, and there are basically moral judgments, which actually, in effect, is a conscience, is innate. It is actually, we are born with it. Humans have, we are born with a conscience. It develops around about the age of 7 years old. And suddenly, we can differentiate from something that is wrong as opposed to something that is morally wrong. So it's going to be physically wrong, but we can suddenly make that differentiation about 7 or 8. This is morally wrong. And so we can actually make this moral moral judgment. What happened to the question? We can make that moral judgment.
You
now.
expect to memorize it better.
But it's so. Okay, what was the question?
No, but
Because I just gonna.
no, it's really about it. Is it well? Let me recast it. Is it really an impossible situation? Is it something that we should feel defeated by? The sense that we don't seem to have the consciousness or the conscience to do the right thing in the area that we're talking about. How do we imbibe that?
Yeah, well, and that comes basically from role models, And you need to. I mean, when we hone the conscience, and in childhood, it's your parents, your teachers, your peer groups who all impact that conscience. So that's what molds this conscience. And so we become somebody who is very concerned about the environment or somebody who's not concerned. That's why I put up that slide about the cannibals, which was actually a fascinating slide. It's like, depends on the society you're raised in. Eating people is fine if you eat people. And if you don't, well, if you're not in that society, well, it's terrible, Yeah. So you got to teach people. You really got to teach people.
All right. The interesting thing about this forum, compared to the forum we had last month which was with the defense minister, it's a very different experience. I wonder why. One dealt with weapons and the need to continue to justify in investing in weaponry and ammunition at the tune of to the tune of 12.5 billion a year. And the other is talking about something that's totally irrelevant and indulgent. We wasted our time this evening listening to him, didn't we? The reason why I felt strongly that we need Bernard here this evening is to force us to take that very important pause in our lives, myself included. As we continue to chug along in this locomotive called GDP. And it's a painful thing to feel guilty. But it's a good thing to feel guilty as a collective. And I think, Bernard, if there's one thing you succeeded in doing, is that I think you managed to prick our conscience as a collective. I think the silence sometimes is good, because we don't know where to start about asking the question. And that's a good sign, and I hope we'll continue to pause, to reflect on our lives. Many of us here in a highly privileged position because we've had the opportunity to have a university education, which allows us to have a sphere of influence. And I guess we need to ask ourselves whether we are using that influence well enough for the right reasons. And Bernard, I'm absolutely sure I'm not speaking for myself. We're immensely proud of you. You may not feel that you've achieved sufficient success in changing hearts and minds, but we need more Bernard Harrisons. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
But being a utilitarian society, we need to give you something.
How about a pig or something?
Here's a picture of the two of us.
Oh, that's very fast.
Last month when I took a picture with Ng Eng Hen, I made it a point to emphasize that I was the better looking one. But somehow tonight I'm having difficulty making that same assertion. Ladies and gentlemen, Bernard Harrison.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we're not going to let you go. By the way, that photograph was taken just now.
Oh,
See,
yes.
so much for technology. Now we need you to write legibly
Oh, gosh. Now this is the most
some
difficult
really
thing.
nice things about us, in particular me.
And this
And
is
then you got
gonna-
to show it to our lovely
And this is going to be...
creative artists with the lens.
And is it like anything?
Yeah, anything about animals and about passion, sex appeal, anything. Hey, don't be a typical Singaporean from Johor. It doesn't have to be palatable.
Right.
So while he's doing that, let me give you a little bit of trailer. Next month, we're going to have yet another very different experience. From Bernard Harrison, the rebel, the heretic, we're going to move to the former head of the civil service,
Oh.
who tried his best to persuade me that he's not civil anymore.
Who is this?
Lim Seong Guan.
Lim Seong Guan.
Lim Seong Guan, former head of civil service. He tried to retire, but the government will not let him. So they decided to give him a very highly paid job as the head of GIC, Government Investment Corporation. He says he's suffering. We should not eat sorillas.
Gorillas.
I told him to write legibly. We should not eat gorillas. They are noble. Right? Very well put. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we will give it to you later.
Okay.
Guys, there's some food and some drinks outside. Please join us and mob him. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.